Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Words on Whiskey, and happy St. Patrick's Day to one and all. I know lots of you are celebrating at home with your own families, and unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we're able to all get together and celebrate the way we would normally would, but I'm delighted that you've taken the time to join us here and celebrate with a few drinks and a very special guest. And for those of us here in Ireland, certainly he's a very familiar face, an absolute gentleman and ambassador for Irish whiskey, not just Irish whiskey through Irish Distillers, but in general, and a wealth of knowledge. And I'm delighted he's taken the time to come here and join us. So wherever you are, grab a glass and take it easy and enjoy our conversation with Ger. And we'll also taste a couple of drams just to celebrate. Good evening, Ger.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, Sergio's my old friend.
How are you?
I'm great. Yeah, had a lovely day, beautiful weather, lovely walk down in Dunleary and some ice cream.
Yes.
And now we're going to have a chat about whiskey and taste a few whiskeys. So what a great day it's been.
Yeah, fantastic. It's typical that we can't have a parade with this weather, but next year now, for sure, there will be one hell of a party, and there will be one hell of a party when all this comes to an end. So, but look, thank you so much for, I know it's St. Patrick's Day and everything, and, you know, you've always been really generous to us in terms of your time and your expertise and knowledge, and taking the time this evening to spend with us. We're very privileged, so thank you very much.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Look, for those that don't know you, can you tell us what your role is, Ger, and you know, what do you do as part of that role?
So I have quite a multifaceted role within Irish Distillers, the whiskey ambassadorial role, where I'm sharing my passion for the various different brands like Redbreast, Middleton, you know, Jameson sometimes as well, and you know, the Powers brand as well. So basically I would do both education around our brands for the trade, so publicans and bar staff, hotel staff, restaurant staff, that sort of thing. And then also what we do is I would do, you know, whiskey events for special interest groups. So you'd have groups like the Irish Whiskey Society, the Cork Whiskey Society, the Kilkenny Whiskey Guild, the Trade in Galway, and, you know, Dingle, of course. So
Waterford.
Waterford. I mean, it's, you know, the list
so many now.
It's brilliant, and it just shows you, when I started the role in 2015, I would have done one whiskey event at night a quarter. Now I could do 4 a week. You know, it is just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, you were doing that many before the lockdown.
Yeah, we were like literally the night before Leo Varadkar made that famous announcement in Washington. I was in Galway, in Sonny Malloy's in Galway, doing a big event. We had, you know, I think there was it was a good group of people. At the time it was not safe. It was you know, the launch of a new whiskey, and we just had a great night. And then the following day, the world changed utterly.
Yeah. I'm sure it's changed. Well, of course, it's changed your role completely. And but look, before we talk about roles and what you do, I'm going to pour a drink here. And actually, I was very kindly actually given a sample by Ian Garrett of their Cask Strength Powers release that they did as part of that Friends of Middleton Distillery Facebook group. So I'm going to have a little drop of that. I probably shouldn't start with the Cask Strength, but it's St. Patrick's Day, so we'll go flat out at the beginning and enjoy that. So,
well, I have that sample, but I don't have it in this room, so I'm not going to leave you to go and get it. So I think I'll start with Middleton Very Rare 2021, because I'm very good to myself. So,
well, you are very good, and again, this is the first Irish whiskey signed by Kevin O'Gorman and produced by Kevin O'Gorman, and
yeah, that's right.
And like the other Middletons, there's been a frenzy to try and get them. So I suppose that's one question I want to ask first
Of
is,
course.
it's quite a limited release, Middleton Very Rare, limited in Ireland. Is there going to be another batch of them coming out this year of the 2021 for those that have missed out the first chance to get them?
Absolutely. So late autumn, you'll have another equal, very similar amount of bottles released in the Irish market. So for two reasons, we held back half the amount produced this year. One was because the on-trade is closed, and
Yes.
very sadly, it doesn't look realistically that it's going to open up in any meaningful sense till after the summer. We may have outdoor dining, 15 tables up to 2 households, but it means a very limited offering for the Irish on-trade. So basically, that's one reason we're holding it back. And the other reason is that traditionally, Christmas time is a big gifting time for Irish whiskey, and Middleton Very Rare is a very popular gifting item for people. So we want to at least give it a chance to be on shelf in wonderful independent Irish whiskey retailers, like the McCambridges of Galway, or the Celtic Whiskey Shop in Dublin, or the Worldwide Wines in Waterford, or you get where I'm coming from, all of those other places. So we wanted to make sure we had some stock at least to give them the other half of the year. One of the reasons why it's becoming so limited is because we can only produce a limited amount every year, because there really is only about 500 to 600 barrels that are suitable to go into Middleton Very Rare at any one time in the distillery. And the batch would be somewhere in the region of between 200 and 300 barrels on a regular basis, would be in a normal year's batch, say like 2021 and say 2019. Now 2020 was an outlier because we were trying to bring the vintage in line with the calendar year. So it meant that we had to essentially produce a smaller batch so that we could produce a new batch in the early 2021, because normally it comes out every October. But so we produced 2020 in October. We had loads of 2019 at the time, as we thought, and we thought the 2019 will tie us over till we release the Middleton Very Rare 2021 in March. But what happened was basically last year in 2020, Middleton Very Rare grew by nearly 60% in the Irish market. And look, we couldn't count on that. Phenomenal. Just this is 180, 185 euro bottle of whiskey, and it was absolutely flying out. Its growth and popularity, along with it just reached a tipping point and really took off. So it was not. It was not foreseen that this would happen. It was carefully planned that we would, 2019 was released in October 2019. We still had plenty of stock in September 2020 of 2019. And then over October, when 2020 launched, we saw this incredible consumption of Middleton Very Rare. And really, we sold out of 2019 and we sold out of 2020 really quickly. So I'm so it was. We'd love to be able to make loads more of it. It'd be great, because obviously we would like to sell more whiskey, but we just don't have the stock. And I can explain why in a little bit of detail, but maybe you have another question, so I don't want to be.
I suppose the big thing would be, how does Idea look on the success of a product like that, in the sense it goes on the market and it can sell out in a couple of hours or in a very short period of time, and obviously it's fantastic for yourselves and it shows the love for the brands and so on. But then when they start hitting the secondary and tertiary markets for 3 times and 4 times the price, how does a company feel about that? Is that good or bad for the brand?
Well, personally, from my own point of view as a whiskey consumer, I don't think it's great. But we as a company, we have a policy of not trying to get into the secondary or third market or get involved in it. And the reason for that is that we make whiskey and we sell it. And that's basically our bread and butter. We could hold back, loads of stock, and then like there was rumors. Do you remember there was rumors about 2020 that there was a warehouse full of it, and it was all gonna, and it was gonna come out in drips and drabs, and that was blatantly not. That was absolutely not true. And I know even internally, traditionally, a lot of people in Irish Distillers buy Middleton Very Rare at Christmas, and they weren't able to because it sold out in a week. It was sold out in less than a week from ourselves, and it was gone from most retailers as well in 3 or 4 days. So how do they feel about it? Well, they're delighted at the success. There's no doubt about it. I think they're amazed at the prices that people are paying for Middleton Very Rare. But again, it's something that as a company we don't get involved in, and it's not our business. And I mean, it's just not our business to be involved in that sort of area. Again, we distill, we bottle, and we sell the whiskey.
Yeah, I mean, large as the distillery is and the huge capacity it has, obviously the vast majority of all production would be going towards Jameson, because that would be, what would it be, 80% of your volume sales at least?
So to look at globally, Jameson is about 7 out of every 10 Irish whiskies consumed globally are just it's really, really large. And Jameson is something that there's a huge amount of dedication put to Jameson in time, resources, but there's no compromise in quality just because of the size of the distillery. We have, as you know, we're a grain to glass distillery. We're a sapling to barrel distillery. We really work hard at having a full line of sight of all of the ingredients that come in, including the grain that goes into Jameson, both the maize and the barley, both malted and unmalted, and also the wood management program that Kevin O'Gorman is still in charge of at the moment, as even though he's moved into the master distiller role as well. That wood management program is nearly 50 years in the making. It is.
So that's Brendan Monks that started that
early
wood
70s.
management program. And what foresight! I mean, hats off to him. One hell of a foresight to plan so far ahead and to foresee the growth that would be coming. But how many? I know there's at least 40 warehouses. It was 42 the last time I was down. Yeah. So I think it was about 1.6 million casks you had down there in Middleton. It's probably grown since.
It has, because we have another maturation site now in Dungorney, which is a couple of kilometers up the river. Actually, the birthplace of Barry Crockett's, our master distiller emeritus's mother, Nora Barry, and Barry is called Barry, after his maternal grandfather. So so we have warehousing up there. The construction of that warehousing has stalled, but under the control of Kevin O'Gorman and his number 2 Finbar, they have Finbar Curran. They have over 1.8 million. There's over, I think it's 1.81 or nearly 1.82 million casks. Like, it is just absolutely phenomenal. And as you said, the majority of those are used for the production of Jameson, both American oak barrels and mainly Oloroso seasoned sherry butts. And basically, they are, I suppose, that is a big part of it. But then we also lay down stock of other types of spirit that would be more common. So we make 3 main styles of pot still. It's probably easier to talk about the distillation first before you talk about the barrels, Yeah.
But before you talk about the different styles of pot still, there may be people that aren't familiar with pot still Irish whiskey and what it is, because Irish distillers are the driving force behind the pot still, and essentially a big force in ensuring that it remained on the landscape and was available, and is available. So for those that wouldn't be familiar, would you explain maybe what the pot still is?
Yeah, so essentially pot still distillation is so it's defined by its mash bill, actually, which is the funny thing. But we call our style in Ireland after the industrial apparatus to make it, the pot still, which probably was, it came here with the The pot still we know today came here with the Dutch. That would have, I suppose, come after the Battle of the Boyne with William of Orange. They perfected this modern pot still. Although distillation, as you know, has been taking, has been, whiskey was first distilled in Ireland, etc. But more than likely, this style of pot still distillation occurs in the 18th century, and it's on the back of a series of malt taxes. So we'd our own parliament, as you know, pre the Act of Union in Dublin, on College Green, and it was called Grattan's Parliament. And basically, in this parliament, they had to raise taxes essentially to give to the crown. So if the crown was going on some adventure, the Peninsula Wars or wars in Italy or wars in the colonies in the Americas, they had to raise taxes in Ireland. So in Ireland, you had all these taxes, like a sword tax. If you wanted to wear your sword, as I know you like to wear your sword, walking to your office.
Normally, yes, yeah.
There was a hat tax. There was window taxes. So you look at Georgian buildings in somewhere like Merrion Square, the servants' quarters would have had quite small windows at the top of the building, and then the lady in the lower of the house would have had big windows because you had to pay a tax on windows. So there was lots of these taxes we deem unusual today, and one of those was a tax on malted barley for breweries and distilleries. And in order to essentially avoid paying this tax or minimize their exposure to this tax, crafty distillers and brewers basically used a proportion of barley that was not malted. So we call it unmalted barley, but actually it is just barley from the same field as the other barley. But basically what they do is they just will dry it to about 14% moisture content and then mill it up separately with the malted barley, which has essentially undergone a process of being tricked into germinating. And there's an enzymatic reaction where you get starches turned into fermentable sugars inside the little grain, and then you just basically mill the two types of barley up together. In our case, it's a 40-60 mash bill, so 40% malted and 60% unmalted in something like the pot still component of Jameson. And then what we do is we mix that together, make it into we mix it with hot water. You basically, that enzymatic reaction continues in there. And then basically what happens is you squeeze out all the bits of husk and everything, and you get a wort full of rich in sugars. You very quickly add yeast. Let's say you add yeast to it, it turns into a beer. Basically, the mother and daughter cell split inside, little bit of ethanol is created. We want to capture the ethanol. So we drop it into a pot still called a wash still. We heat it up, to a boiling point, and it starts to boil. And as we know, you're trying to separate two liquids based on a boiling point. Essentially trying to separate out the water, which boils at 100 degrees, and then separate out the alcohol, which has a lower boiling point just under 84 degrees Celsius. And basically separating them out, and then we distill it 3 times. And the reason it's called, in Ireland, we say pot still distillation is, and why don't we say unmalted barley distillation like in Scotland? They say malted distillation is, as distillation in Scotland or distilling in Scotland was essentially illegal or not officially legal until the 1820s, whereas in Ireland it was legal, but you had a cap on the amount you could produce until the same Excise Act that appeared in 1823 that got rid of the malt taxes, that made distilling legal in Scotland. And there was a Spirits Act and all that on the back of it, because the Crown were trying to regularize their taxation. And basically in Ireland, because distilling was legal, it tended to be urban, it tended to be on a bigger scale. So our pot stills were bigger. So I think they just called it after the industrial apparatus they used to make it. Whereas in Scotland, they called it after the agricultural ingredient, which was the malted barley. So again, we both make whiskey, but it's a bit like a Scottish accent and an Irish accent, We always saying things,
I'd be right in saying that the majority of distilleries, historically were pot still distilleries. There were very few single malt distilleries at the time. And so
that's true. That's true. And it was because this style was the biggest selling style of whiskey in the mid 19th century, but by the time John Jameson signs his exclusive contract in the 1860s with W&A Gilbey's, the makers of Redbreast, unfortunately, Irish whiskey was already in decline, and Scottish whiskey was getting more popularity, and unfortunately, that continued on for another 100 years until the company I work for basically formed with Jameson, Powers, and the Cork Distilleries Company in 1966.
Yeah, I think that's an important story, Ger, in terms of the merger and the formation of Irish Distillers, and secondly, I suppose, what was the decision and what was the logic behind that decision to actually determine that Jameson was the brand that they would push? Because they did sit down, they made a decision, look, we need to amalgamate, we need to save the industry. What brand are we going to start pushing? And it was Jameson that was decided upon, and very successfully.
Well, Powers was the biggest selling whiskey, so they were like, why didn't they go for Powers? Isn't it? It's why is that strange? Well, looking at it from a subjective point of view, you had more Jamesons on the board. They pushed their brand, but I mean that's the kind of the funny, like a funny light-hearted way of saying it. But actually, it was the most potential was seen in Jameson, and the least risk of it failing was in Jameson as well. So the least risk. They had a really good business in Powers. They didn't want to interfere with it. They didn't want to jeopardize its production. It was the biggest selling whiskey in Ireland, biggest selling Irish whiskey, and they wanted Powers to basically, be. But they saw the most potential in Jameson. So the reason for that is that Powers was the biggest selling Irish whiskey in Ireland until 2012, believe it or not, and it's still in the top. It's the number 2 Irish selling whiskey still in Ireland after Jameson, and it's in the top 8 spirits in Ireland as well. So people forget that about Powers, but that was the reason why they picked Jameson, is they saw the most potential of relaunching Jameson in the American market, which is our biggest market, was our biggest market, and probably will be our biggest market in the future. And they were also, you see, when they were looking at Jameson, they only started bottling Jameson in 1966. So Jameson, before that, was bottled by a publican. He was provided with labels and he signed a contract to say he wouldn't adulterate it, or it was bottled by wholesalers like J.J. Mann Wholesale in Kildare, who are still going today. Or we sold new make spirit, as clear as water.
All right.
To people like Gilbey's, who are the makers of Redbreast. So that was so Bow Street, essentially at the time, they were looking at Jameson, and they also had plans to build a new distillery in Middleton in Cork, a very modern distillery. And this is where the wood management program started. Brendan Monks was tasked with going out into the world and finding or building relationships with port wine producers, with sherry wine producers, with French wine producers, with Marsala wine producers, with Malaga wine producers, and also with the they had already signed a contract in the early 50s with the American whiskey industry to buy their used American whiskey barrels. And this is because of that weird, I suppose, protectionist law that means that you have to use a brand new American oak barrel every time you make a batch of either Kentucky bourbon or Tennessee whiskey, which account for like 95% of.
So that was a law that came into effect in about the 1920s or late 1910s to protect
1930s.
the 1930s.
Just before the Volstead Act was revoked. So the Volstead Act was 1919. Senator from Michigan gets this law passed. Modern communications like the wireless radio had become very popular, and the most popular stations were evangelical Christian stations that would talk about Brother Matthew. And this guy, this Jesuit, Father Matthew Theobald, he basically, they called him in America, they didn't want to recognize he was a Roman Catholic priest, but he basically started the temperance movement, and his writings were taken up by the evangelical teachers. People like the Salvation Army were really strong with the message, and it was a different time. They thought that they would solve all the ills of society by essentially banning the sale of alcohol. But as we know, it didn't work. It actually led to a lot of criminality, etc. So anyway, when 1919, the Volstead Act comes in, there's a huge amount of people involved in the lumber industry, in the coopering industry. Well, obviously there's distilling and brewing industry, because beer would have been lagered and transported in wooden barrels at this time. They were all left destitute.
Yeah.
So a group of politicians called the Dixie Democrats lobbied Joe Kennedy, who was either Speaker of the House or Leader of the Senate. I can't remember which, but he was obviously a very powerful man, and he was JFK's dad. And they got this law passed that when the act was revoked, that you had to use a brand new American oak barrel. That means you had to chop down more trees, you had to make more barrels, so everybody was winning, and they all had jobs.
Yeah, it protected their jobs essentially.
And it was, and it is what bourbon is today. I just, I think it'll be. I know that I haven't tasted pre-prohibition bourbon, but I know that some of the societies have done pre-prohibition tastings in Ireland, and it must be really fascinating to taste bourbon that had different rules of production, and that would have been made in places like Philadelphia and really strange, places we would not associate with being traditionally whiskey making places at the time.
But a place where the Irish certainly made a home for themselves at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were transporting in whiskey into America for as long as we've been making whiskey in Ireland. And certainly people like Charlie Roach have gone through shipping manifests and found all sorts of records of whiskey being transported into America. And if he's listening, I'm sure he'll text you in now and tell you. He sends you an email with it all, because he's an absolutely amazing research he does behind it. But the thing what it is that, obviously people bring their whiskey with them. We would have had an agent in the United States for Jameson called W.A. Taylor, and they were in New York, and they had a 5-star Jameson whiskey because they were American, which is amazing. And obviously when Prohibition came along, that distribution stopped anyway for a good amount of time.
Yeah. In terms of that arrangement, then I suppose Jameson and IDL are in the privileged position that, they've signed these long-term contracts with barrel producers out there, and you've secured arrangements for really top quality barrels.
Yeah, and the great thing about American barrels is they're made to really strict federal specifications. So an American standard barrel has to be a certain shape, size, made from white American oak. From the eastern continent in the United States, all of it really comes from, places like Missouri and Kentucky and obviously Tennessee and Kansas and places like that, places I would have never thought of as being oak producing areas. And they have a long history of sustainable oak forestry in America, because they saw it as a long-term crop that people used to buy into. And that's something that we're only really coming around to in Ireland, about a long-term crops like oak. Obviously you're our age, we're middle-aged men, and reality
pushing it now.
No, I'm a middle-aged man now, sorry. But what I'm getting at is that you plant a tree today, it's probably not going to be ready in Ireland for about 120 years. And in America, maybe 130 years. Yeah. So, that's to get into that business, you really have to have foresight. You're thinking of longevity, but the Americans, the French before them, they have this attitude when it comes to hardwoods that they are, that there is potential in having this long-term view, even when their own lifetime is gone.
Yeah. Well, I think thanks to the great work that Quilcha are doing, the forestry group here, I think that is changing now here as well, and a long-term view is being taken. And sustainability, of course, is a huge factor now in production of Irish whiskey. I know with IDL, but generally in the industry, sustainability is something really important.
Yeah, and the Irish Whiskey Association certainly would be, championing sustainability within the industry. One, it's the right thing to do, first of all. Secondly, I think consumers are increasingly concerned about products they buy, that they are sustainable, from a packaging point of view, from a production point of view, and that they are not having a negative effect on the environment and the climate. So it is a really important, it's become important to the whiskey consumers. If the whiskey consumer thinks that, as Barry Crockett said to me once, there's no one more discerning than a whiskey consumer. So they'll tell you if your whiskey's right or not. They're ultimately, no matter if you think it's the best thing to slice bread, from a packaging, from a naming point of view, if the consumer doesn't like it, forget about it. So.
Well, obviously, Jameson has hit the right spot, the right balance between price, quality, and branding. I suppose those three elements need to be in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I went totally off piece there a minute ago, but you were getting at why Jameson, and basically they looked at the product and they looked at the whiskey that they were producing, and Jameson up to 1968 was a pot still, a Dublin pot still whiskey. I've tasted some of the whiskey from Bow Street, and it's really, it's a wonderful piece of history. But in reality, and you can certainly see the DNA. So when they built the new Middleton distillery, they worked really hard on making those three different types of pot still that they make down there. The light pot Middleton, which it's light in mouthfeel, but it's actually quite spicy. And then you have this Middleton mod pot, which is the Jameson Bow Street style of pot still. So that was the Jameson one. And then the trad pot, which is this really heavy, oily, historical pot still, if you want to call it that.
And is that down to is that down to the cuts in the distillation that determine the weight of the style, or is it different mash bills?
Yeah, basically it's mainly down to run rates, temperatures, where the cuts are made in the second and third distillation, where you differentiate between your heads and your tails, and basically how narrow the cut is. So if we start from the trad pot end of things, it only gives us a yield of about 30% of a normal yield of something like Middleton mod pot. So it's really it's the least efficient.
Yeah.
Sorry?
A very narrow cut.
Very narrow cut, very inefficient from a production point of view. And also, we only produce it 1 week a year, so we don't lay down a lot of stock of it, because as you correctly pointed out, the majority of the efforts in Middleton are going towards making Jameson. But Jameson is amazing because it allows us then to work on other projects like Redbreast 27-year-old or Redbreast 10-year-old here. We're able to go off and
it really has become a gateway product, not just for your own brands actually, but you know what I'm saying, like the breakthroughs that Jameson have made in the US in particular and globally have enabled the whole sector to rise. So it's not just IDL products that are gaining popularity, and I think a rising tide lifts all boats, as they say, and obviously your other brands have been very successful, and a premiumization in the industry is happening, and actually probably happening at a faster rate than anybody would have anticipated. I'd say even despite yourselves having seen that kind of growth. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. And I started in Irish Distillers in September 2001, and prior to that I worked in telecoms for about 18 months.
Right, okay.
At the time it was a really growth area. You'd a lot of people in the market. It was a really exciting time to be in telecoms.
Deregulation at that time.
That's exactly it. So I worked for ESAT BT just after Dennis O'Brien had sold it to BT and ESB, and then ESB left the arrangement. So basically, I was there just as the two companies merged, and they were obviously everybody was fighting for market share in a deregulated market. It was very exciting. You had companies that don't exist anymore, like Formus Broadband and WorldCom, and basically I cut my teeth there in hard sales. Some really, really hard sales. So I mean, it was like you lived and died by your Friday figures, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So
Well, I worked in the sector myself actually back then. I mean that we were with Spirit Telecom, but I think were you based down in Grand Canal Dock at the time as well?
That's right, in the building across from the Malthouse, the original Malthouse, where the old cats and dogs home used to be.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And we did a walking tour of Dublin actually. How long ago was it? And you were kind of giving us a guided tour, and I think there was another one as well with Eric giving us a tour of Dublin, and it started around that area. Of course, Dublin was full of distilleries and malt houses back in the
absolutely.
late 1800s.
Yeah, absolutely. So Grand Canal Dock would have been, they would have brought all of, you would have brought barley down the canals. It was a main form of transportation before the essentially the railways were built, and then obviously the railways very quickly took over as the main way of getting whiskey around, getting barley around, whatever it was. But when I joined Irish Distillers, really there was Jameson, Paddy, Powers. There was Bushmills as well. We owned at the time. It was 2005 when it moved. When we sold it, and then basically there was Redbreast had just been essentially kind of taken back into Irish Distillers from
early 1990s, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the late 90s. So basically what happened was originally in 1991 we started making it in-house. So to celebrate this 30 years of Irish Distillers distilling, maturing and bottling Redbreast, as pre-1984 we sold a new make spirit to Gilbey's, and they filled their own barrels and matured them in Drury Street between 1965 and 1984, and prior to that in Hatch Street, beside the old Harcourt Street train station, which is now the Odeon Bar.
Yes, I know it well.
Yeah.
I know the Odeon Bar, not as the old distillery.
And bizarrely, their vaulted cellars there underneath the Odeon, there was actually, that's where they used to mature. There used to be warehousing there because it was the end of the line. And Gilbey's had their main warehouse there, but their bottling hall was up in Sackville Street or
O'Connell Street.
O'Connell Street. Yeah. And that there was an extensive fire in the 1950s, and then they moved their head office. I don't know where it went to then after that, but basically their warehousing in Hatch Street remained there until the 60s, and then they moved into Drury Street to the old Powers bottling hall. So when Powers moved to Fox and Geese, which is out in the Nace Road, where we bottle all the Jameson now today, basically that was originally a Powers site. Gilbey's moved in to the site down in Drury Street in Dublin. You think a place like the Market Bar, that was a bottling hall. It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, well, there's still elements that you see there. Some of the Powers logos in that building and still up on the wall. So, but look, Jerry, you said you started in 2001. What level did you start at, and what did you start doing?
So I worked in telecoms, and the reason I was telling you about that is I had a very nice car. I had a very good salary. It was, as you know, at the time, it was very good. Celtic Tiger times, crazy stuff. But I was very, unhappy by it. I just found it very soulless. If that's not, it was soulless. I needed something that I could believe in, and I sat down with my father one night, and he said to me, "Look, what are you interested in? What do you most like?" And I said, "Well, I absolutely love the drink industry, and I have a fascination with whiskey, and I didn't drink whiskey at the time. I can tell you that, but I was always fascinated by the different brands. Have you ever seen that poster with all the labels on it?
Yes, those, yeah.
And I was just amazed at all these whiskey brands that were there. And he said to me, "Well, why don't you apply to a couple of companies that are involved in it?" So I went to the Yellow Pages at the time, which was a phone book, a commercial phone book, which had Yellow Pages, and I went to the drinks industry section. And at the time, there was about 8 companies in it. So I applied to Beamish and Crawford. I applied to Gilbey's of Ireland. I applied to Irish Distillers Limited. I applied to, I got their addresses were there, and I wrote a cover letter and I posted it. So that was
wow, but yeah,
I know,
I remember those days.
crazy. And I was overwhelmed with the lack of replies from any of them. So I had to go about it a different way. There was no reply from any of my lovely letters, and I got the email address of the national sales manager, or maybe sales director at the time, a guy called Peter Gologly in Irish Distillers, and I got his email address. So I sent him an email and asked, if there was any roles going, would he consider me? And I got called. I didn't hear anything. 6 months later, I got a call to come in for an interview. And I went in for an interview in the old shipping building on Bow Street. It's a lovely red brick building, which is now, I think, a theatrical college, which had the May Lane depot for Jameson behind it. And that's where the last of the stables used to be for the horses and everything. It's a beautiful old shipping building, Victorian red brick sandstone building. And I went up had my interview there, and basically they offered me a job as a relief sales rep. I had no idea what it was. I'll be perfectly honest with you, but I just wanted to get into the company. But essentially what it was is it was a merchandiser who had some sales responsibility in some smaller convenience and some smaller traditional pubs. So I had about 30 or 40 accounts, mainly around Dublin 8, in Inchicore, where it so happens my family originally are from James's Street, Inchicore, Mead Street, that general area on my father's side. So I knew the area quite well. And even though there was a Celtic Tiger going on, it wasn't the most salubrious of areas, unfortunately.
So much has changed there now, hasn't it?
So much has changed. But it was brilliant. I really enjoyed it. And it's funny, my name was known, the family name was known by some of the publicans. It was really, guys that were really tough nuts, like real Dublin tough, rough publicans. Like they had to deal with really difficult situations on a regular basis in their public houses, and they were incredibly good to me. I mean, the Dylans who had the Black Lion, or there was just a lot of different people. Sadly, many of them are gone out of the business now. And that was my first job. But after 6 months, my boss, Jim Cummins, at the time, I think he saw that I had some potential, and then I got my full sales territory, which was given to me, and I was moved to kind of South Dublin, and then after that, they moved me 6 months later down to Wicklow, Wexford in the on-trade, and then I got moved to. There was a restructuring, and then I kind of did Wicklow, Wexford, Waterford, South Dublin, Laois, and Kildare in the off-trade. Very huge area, which was at the time was probably 3 areas put together. But again, I got exposure to the off-trade, to wholesale, and the country was going through a big transformation. Then you had, drink driving really being imposed, and rightly it should be. And then you also had the smoking ban really taking effect, and you had the large-scale closure of rural pubs, a kind of a change in our consumption habits. So, but what was also happening, and I didn't realize it at the time, was the continued growth, 30 years of continual growth we have this year of Jameson.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
It was growing and growing. It was definitely visible in Dublin. I noticed when I moved in to the city centre in Dublin in 2005 as the rep in city centre, which is it's a busy job, but I was very lucky to get that exposure. I could see it. It was just Jameson Ginger and Lime had just been launched. You had this growth, this momentum there, and it introduced people to something other than white spirit like vodka, which mainly at the time would have been consumed with Red Bull. Again, it would have been or Coca-Cola or other stuff. But we hit upon this drink, or a guy called Richard Black, who's from Foxrock. He's from up the road there, so he's not too far away. And Richard was the marketing guy for whiskey, and he basically forced everyone to bang their heads against the wall and said, ginger ale is the future. And everyone's going, nobody is going to drink whiskey with ginger ale. And how wrong we all were. And then a star was born. But it meant that it introduced a brown spirit to people, and they could get into, became part of their drink repertoire. And then I suppose we had the terrible crash in 2008, 2009. And then people started looking at more, real things. And what's not more real than something that we gave the world than Irish whiskey, that's made here in Ireland and distributed all over the world. I think it's, people started looking at Redbreast. And for me, then that was it. I was totally hooked. And Redbreast was first introduced to me by Barry Crockett in 2001 in September, the first.
Well, it's any better man to have introduced you to that.
I tell you, well, I didn't know who he was. So I was in, we were in the hotel called the Rochestown Park Hotel, I think, in Cork. And we were getting an introduction to some new whiskies that were launching in, I think it was January, it was September 2001, sorry. Yeah, not 2002. And we had Jameson 18-year-old launch. We Jameson 12-year-old relaunch in that new long bottle, which was the last bottle, away from the 1780 style bottle. And then on the same day, we did a tasting of Bush 10. We did a tasting of Middleton Very Rare, which was going to be launched. And then we tasted Redbreast 12-year-old, which we were taking on from Fitzgerald and Company, which had just been re-merged back into Irish Distillers.
Yeah,
so
I mean, there is that handover period where Fitzgerald's had the brand for a while. I think it was 2 or 3 years.
And prior to that, Edward Dillon distributed it and did a great job.
And they're still distributing strongly. They're still a massive distributor in Ireland.
Oh, they are, absolutely. And we, it's great.
Yeah.
It's great to have Redbreast back in the house, but it's 30 years. And to celebrate that, the Redbreast 10-year-old was basically...
Well, I was just about to open this up here. So actually, while I do that, you might be so kind as to share with our listeners the makeup of this particular whiskey and how the release came about. So obviously, Redbreast sales have gone through the roof generally everywhere. And I know there's been a big push in the premium side of Irish whiskey, and Redbreast has been one of the big beneficiaries of that and one of the drivers. But this particular release was limited to 7,000 bottles and sold out in 5 or 6 hours.
So I think one thing to point out is that it is just absolutely incredible that in a couple of hours that you 7,000 bottles of an Irish whiskey that was €100. It's no longer available. It was produced to celebrate the 30 years, as I said, of Redbreast being produced 100% in-house in Irish Distillers. And basically, we're really proud of Redbreast. And you know how passionate I am about it because I obviously talk about it a lot. I do a lot of tastings, but it's it contains all the different types of pot still that we produce in Middleton. So light pot Middleton, mod pot, and that trad pot as well, which is very apparent on the nose. And it's 10 to 15 years old. So it's not a 10-year-old is the youngest in here. It was last produced in the early 1970s. It's my favorite historical Irish whiskey. So whiskey that isn't, that the distillery doesn't exist anymore. Basically, it's so the 10-year-old, not the one we're drinking now. This is a reimagining,
the original of that.
And they've done a pretty good job now. You'd think Billy Lighton, whose signature is on the bottle, and Dave McCabe, they've done a fantastic job. And it's 59.1% ABV, non-chill filtered, all of that lovely stuff. And it is ex-American bourbon barrels, Oloroso seasoned cherry butts from Spain. And basically, you've got them all married together here between 10 and 15 years old. And you get an inclusion of those more traditional style of pots, this trad pot style, in order to, I suppose, give you that more antique or historical smell, aroma, and flavor to the whiskey. I mean, I think it's.
Well, Sláinte first.
Sláinte.
Happy Paddy's Day. I mean, it's definitely got that, walking into an antique shop smell sort of thing. It's definitely a mustiness and a robustness that is not hugely different from the main Redbreast 12, let's say, but different.
It shouldn't be.
Yeah,
it shouldn't be, because the whiskies that are in here are, this is a Redbreast whiskey, so its makeup is true in line with the current Redbreast family. But I suppose it's the inclusion of the trad pot, the age profile as well, 10 to 15 years. You've got a distillate that normally is reserved for much older whiskies. So the trad pot would appear in the Redbreast 21. It would also appear in a Redbreast 27-year-old, which is just a stunning whiskey. But you also, in all Redbreasts, so you have your light pot Middleton age in both ex-bourbon barrels and sherry barrels, and then you've got your Middleton, your mod pot in your ex-bourbon barrels, all aged 10 to 15 years, and then you got your trad pot in here in both your ex-bourbon and your American oak barrels as well, adding this added layer of complexity to it. Like it's got.
Oh, it's complex for sure. Yeah,
there's a lot going on, and that's absolutely true. But there is those dark fruits that you find common across the Redbreast range. The contribution of the fortified wine seasoned barrels, the Oloroso sherry barrels, this pot still intensity. This spiciness that you get, and it just layers and layers, and the oakiness on the nose, and then the taste. Like those tannins are rich. They're not dry. They're not fudgy. They're rich, and they really work well with the pot still. So you're getting wood spice. You're getting pot still spice, oak and spirit working in tandem.
Yeah, and you're getting the influence there of the sherry cask. And again, you have a relationship with the País Levato in Spain, the cooperage there. So sherry influence, of course, is coming through, and that's. Our Redbreast system was for,
It's like marzipan, that type of note, fig, know. But there's a lot of vanillin in those Spanish oak barrels as well, so you get a lot of vanilla. I get kind of like caramel, like toffee, that type of note. I think Billy often describes it as treacle, because it was something that Billy in his childhood would have had treacle on pudding and stuff like that. I don't have that reference, but
toffee red apple, and even hints of thick cut marmalade and creme brulee are in there as well. But it's very definitely red fruit, red ripe fruit. But it's a wonderful addition, and I know people will say, when will this hit the main stay of the Redbreast range? Or is this a one-off for the members of the Birdhouse?
So I can tell you, honestly, that there is not a lot of traditional pot still available for us to reproduce this.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So whether we have all the other components, that's great for this whiskey, all the other whiskies.
Yeah.
I think even to put as much as they've put in here, and there's a healthy drop of it in here, and you can really taste it, which is fantastic. We do not have it at this age, because it's earmarked for whiskies like Redbreast 27-year-old, which is 27 to 30 years old.
Yeah.
Like whiskies like Redbreast 21-year-old, of which we are sold out of at the moment in Ireland. We've no more. Sold out.
Really?
For the year. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
Absolutely mad. You can still get it in other markets, but just happens here in Ireland, we sold every little bit that we had available to ourselves. So if these whiskies continue to grow, we can't be putting it into something now with the risk of not having those brands disappear off the shelf in the future.
Yeah.
And this is the problem with the growth. This is a a challenge now that we're facing is managing this great success. Like it's something to watch. It's not a negative. It's just, wouldn't it be great to have more of this? And if we come out next week and could make more of it, maybe next year, we can't. We just don't have the stock of it. So I would say at the moment now, that is my answer to say that this as it is today, what the whiskey in this bottle, it's just not there to make it again in the near medium future. So it doesn't mean that there won't be any more redbreast expressions. There just won't be a redbreast 10-year-old
like this.
It's quick like Manuel Love. Do you remember Manuel Love?
Oh, I remember the Manuel Love. That I think as far as I can tie in, if you like, the real interest in the acceleration of collectability and increase in prices down to that release of the Manuel Love was when there was, if you like, almost a frenzy on Irish whiskey started probably at that point.
4,800 bottles that took the guts of 4.5 months to sell out.
Yeah.
We sold a similar amount in less than an hour. Of the Manuel Love, and that just shows you. It shows you. It's also the way people are purchasing things. At the time, purchasing something from a whiskey from a website was seen as unusual. Nowadays, people don't think twice about purchasing online anything, and particularly in the last 12 months. So we've become more used to that. And also, this was a celebration, and we expected this to be available for a couple of weeks. And I had this conversation with a colleague who was closer to launching this than I was, and they were saying to me, well, we'll hope it sells out in a couple of weeks.
Wow. I'm sure they're delighted.
And I said I don't think so, because I already knew from talking to some people that I had trusted the information of it coming with, that this will, I think the words were fly out, or excuse all the puns, because they themselves wanted to buy it, and you could see the excitement in their eyes,
There's a question in here from Liam Sinclair. Liam out in Scotland. How are you, Liam?
Hi, Liam.
And the popularity of redbreast will mean the continual rise in cost of the dram.
Well, I'd first say I'd say for the day that's in it, we'll call it a toast gone. But instead of a dram. But basically, Liam. Well, will it continue to rise? I think more limited whiskies, because they'll sell out. You can imagine the market will dictate the pricing. We obviously sell at a price, and then it's sold on, or in a hotel, say a 5-star hotel, they see the rarity of something and they'll set the price at what they feel their market will pay for it. So will it continue to rise? Well, I think what I would say to you is there's an Irish whiskey at every price point for everybody. There is great value and depth within the range of Irish whiskies, including redbreast. There's your redbreast at your €63, 63 to €65, your redbreast 12. Then you have your redbreast Lustow, your redbreast cask strength, your redbreast 15-year-old, and then you jump up to your 21, and then up to your 27-year-old, and then you have all the single casks, and there's a redbreast at every price point, basically, is what I'm saying to you.
What's it like, Ger, to have so many brands under your portfolio and to be, responsible for showcasing those, if you like, to the audience? I mean, you Powers, you've Method and Madness, you've Middleton Very Rare, you've Redbreast, and you've James. So yes, I think I've covered everything. Yeah, and what's it like to
Spot range?
Green Spot. I forgot the Spot range. Yeah,
well,
so of course
distributed by Mitchell's in Ireland. It's their brand, in Ireland, Mitchell's, and outside of Ireland, it's distributed by our sister companies in the Pernod Ricard family of companies. And then as you said, Method and Madness, you've Middleton Very Rare range, you've Jameson, you've Powers, you have a really great group of whiskies, and I think there's different occasions, and the great thing is there's new whiskies coming out all the time.
Well, that's the thing.
Exciting.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing I wanted to. One of the things I wanted to point out is, as a large dominant player in the marketplace and with a very successful product and a nice portfolio, it'd be quite easy to sit back and be comfortable with your lot. And how much of the innovation do you get to hear of early on, and what drives that innovation?
People from all around the company sitting down and talking about, people are invested emotionally, professionally, physically in the production of these whiskies. So this whiskey that we have here, the idea came from January 12, the January 12 months before COVID, basically.
Yeah.
So
okay.
The idea, so we had a meeting and we had loads of ideas. We all sat in a suite in a Dublin city centre hotel, the Dean Hotel, and there was people there from the blending team, from the bottling team, from Fox and Geese, from people from maturation, people there from marketing, people there from sales. So there was a huge amount of people in a room. Maybe 15 people, and we were all putting ideas up on boards. What do we think about the Spot range, or Jameson, or Middleton, or sorry, not Jameson, but the other whiskies, and we were saying, where do we want to go from here? So that's just how it was done recently. But basically, a lot of the innovation that you're going to see in the next 12 to 24 months came out of meetings like that, and then those projects are started. Some of them don't go anywhere, and then some of them do. Some of them are to celebrate anniversaries like this, and it was something somebody said about 1991, and people are always talking about Redbreast 10 as being a popular whiskey, and I may have had something to do with pushing this idea forward as being a good idea, but that was about it. Then it was brought by the brand team, people like Kieran O'Donovan, Billy Lighton, Dave McCabe, other people in production, Dave Quinn, being on the front line, all involved in that.
Yeah, being very much on the front line as you are, Ger, both on the consumer and on the pub side as well, and on the trade side. Does it give you a much stronger insight into what the customer sentiment is and what direction things are moving in? And how does that translate then to product innovation?
Well, the reason I would have been invited to that meeting would be because of that very statement that you've just made, that I'm out constantly in normal times doing whiskey events, meeting people in the whiskey community, and also listening to what is exciting them in the whiskey world, whether it's something that one of our competitors are doing, or and there's Dominic. Hi, Dominic, lovely to see you. And basically, we would all, I would come back and kind of try and articulate what people say to me, and let's not forget, people like Billy Lighton always work at Whiskey Live, so he can talk to people and see what they have to say about the whiskey he's directly involved in basically putting together as a whiskey. And then also, you get the packaging guys coming in to that as well. You get all of these. No problem, Liam. We'll allow your. We'll forgive you this time. But absolutely. I was just only in jest saying that about the toast gone. But so it's not just me. It's Billy Lighton. You have Kevin O'Gorman is really active at getting out there. Kevin's really keen to get out and meet whiskey drinkers. And as I said to, I don't know if I said it to you earlier or if I said it to you now, but basically Barry Crockett would have said, there's no one more discerning than the whiskey drinker. They'll tell you exactly what your whiskey is and isn't. And social media also helps that as well. So, the comments that are on your on Facebook now or on YouTube now, people like Billy, Dave McCabe, they're part of the whiskey community as well. The brand managers are, so they see what people are saying about the different products, and they get really get huge pride out of people saying they love the whiskey or it's a really good whiskey. It really means a lot to them. I think more than I can really express how invested they are. It isn't just a job for any of these people. It is their life, and it will be, even when they retire, it will be their life.
I just wanted to share a few photos here, and look, you're incredibly modest. You've been nominated and won Brand Ambassador of the Year many times, and I know that with 20 years experience in the industry and as many as in the brand ambassador role, you've picked up many awards. And I think this was down in Dingle, one of the award ceremonies down there.
Myself and Mr. Egan having the crack there.
Colin, yeah. People I haven't seen. Actually, well, one question you might be able to answer is how have you adopted to the changes that have happened over this last year? How much more difficult has it made your job, and what opportunities has it opened up for you?
Well, I have to say it has been the most challenging year of my career in either the whiskey business or in employment. And I thought, I thought the recession in the 2008 was really tough. I thought, particularly, I moved jobs as well. All that, changing career. It's always challenging. You're learning new things. This literally has been turned the world on its head. Basically, at the very start, there was what are we going to do? This is all going to be over in a couple of months. That was the attitude. The belief is you're optimistic that things are going to open up. But then it became very quickly apparent that the only way that we could engage with consumers again was actually to pivot, to use that awful expression that we're all becoming used to online. So this sort of engagement that we're having here, where I'm literally about a mile away from you, but in a different...
Even a mile away. I mean, for those that don't know, Gerard was about 100 meters from where I live, and
I can see out the window.
It seems so strange to be talking this way, but yeah, that's the way it is at the moment. But
so we've done an enormous amount of online activity. My team have done an enormous amount of online activity over the year, like literally engaging with thousands of people, hundreds of online tastings. I have Derek King working in my team, the Global Powers Ambassador, and Derek does a lot of tastings with the United States. Like, he's up till 3 or 4 in the morning on Saturday nights talking to the West Coast of America. You have Rowan Lacey, our Prestige Whiskey Ambassador, who does a huge amount of work for me, doing tastings for the Redbreast, the Middletons, the Spot range, the Method Madness range. Then we have Pippa, Ryan, and Rachel Sheehan, and they are the Jameson ambassadors. Both ladies from Cork. One who lives in Cork, right beside Middleton, Rachel, and then Pippa lives in Dublin at the moment and is the brand ambassador in Dublin. But obviously, with the trade closed, they've had to do a lot of online tastings, a lot of online training, and then we've also got Andrew Dickey, our spirits specialist, working in my team, and they've all been doing trainings, training bar staff online, training restaurant staff. So when things reopened the last time, we did a lot of online training, and we hope to do. We've been recording a lot of drinks videos, educational videos, in order to create a suite of content that we can push out on social, and also use internally for training and that sort of stuff. So it has been. I remember working in Richmond marketing and being amazed at Red Bull, who were really, really advanced. They have their own studio in Austria, and the amount of content that they create is enormous with the athletes that they have working with them. And they were miles ahead of everyone else, is all I'm saying. They really were. And it was just the way that they realized that content was king. I think that famous statement by Bill Gates in 1995. Content is king. Couldn't have told you what content was, but really it is now. It's just, this is content that we're engaged in here. But it means that people are consuming whiskey, you know, at a much more sophisticated level than when I started this role, even, and that would have been in 2014. I think I started in this role. Seamus Larry left the business, and I luckily applied and got his job with help from Seamus. He gave me great coaching when I was going for the interviews and stuff like that. So what I'm saying now is that the last 12 months, we've really had to, like you yourself, we were, you know, we used to meet at so many whiskey events. That Redbreast 27-year-old launch that we had in Bow Street, and we were all
that was the one, you know, the last one before the lockdown, really.
And we had an amazing night, and we had great, you know, great interaction with Billy Lighton, with and
Kevin was there, and Dave
McCabe. You know, really, really great night. And I don't know why Carol wasn't there. Maybe she was as well, wasn't she? Carol there as well.
Well, I enjoyed that night, so I can't remember.
So what I'm saying is that we used to meet on a regular basis. Now we only invited 80 people, you know, to that night, and you know, a lot more people turned up because of word of mouth and what have you. But I mean, it's a really great. What I'm saying is just Irish whiskey has just exploded, but I think it's continued to grow during the various lockdowns that we've had over the last 12 months.
But is it a different audience now that you think you're reaching online as opposed to what you were reaching before? Is it, I think, you know, an opportunity to reach a different generation, different type of drinker? Or, I mean, obviously the consumer has changed. I'd like to get your viewpoint on that, how the consumer has changed anyway, and then the difference between how the consumer has changed since lockdown began.
Well, how's the consumer changed? Well, you know, there are people who are craving real world experiences. So they're craving that camaraderie, you know, that we're all experiencing something at one time. So whether it's an online cooking class or a online yoga class, you know, having some wonderful whiskies like the kits that the Palace Bar put together, you know, these amazing you know, on the Palace Bar's website, they have these amazing whiskey tasting kits that you can buy there. You have Dick Max and Dingle, they have amazing whiskey tasting kits. They're only two of the pubs that have had to totally change their approach to dealing with people. And then also
encourage people to check out those packs that the pubs are doing. I mean, they're trying to reinvent themselves and get through very difficult times. So whatever can be done, so please do try and support them. And you know, as soon as they open up, I won't be too far away.
We'll never leave.
No,
and the last drink I had in a pub was with you actually, as well.
Yes.
And that's. So the pubs are so important. But what I'm trying to get at is that I've been supporting, through myself and my team, we've been supporting the on-trade. So I've been supporting pubs like on Pucon. I did a tasting last night. Tomorrow night I'm doing the tasting for Sonny Malloy's in Galway with Kevin O'Gorman. I'm done a tasting on Friday with the Palace Bar. But so they put together these really top quality kits and post them out to people. And then people can tune in through Zoom at a certain time and then have the tasting.
Yeah.
So there's people that are getting involved in these tastings that have never even, you know, really thought about going to a whiskey tasting, because it's literally getting dropped to their home and they're craving that experience and their friend tells them about it. Or it's a corporate thing. It could be a company. I'm doing a tasting for a well-known technology company based in nearby us at the end of April, and I've done tastings for pharmaceutical companies. You know, I've done tastings with hotels that are, you know, trying to keep their staff engaged. You know, 5-star properties trying to keep their staff engaged. So I'm doing tastings with them. I'm doing internal education. I mean, it's just like It is.
But I mean, there was a lot done as well in the early days. Obviously, there was the making of the sanitizer, and then there was I know you had the bar starts and bar smarts, and then
Yes.
you've done quite a few programs for bartenders. And in the States, I know there was a lot of money set aside for bartenders. So the industry has done a lot, or IDL have done a lot to look after the people behind the industry, as have a lot of brands, but IDL in particular, early on, were there at the forefront of giving back and helping protect what they could. But,
Yes.
Ultimately, the pubs, well, that's one point then I'd like to bring up is overall, IDL have weathered the storm in terms of sales rather well compared to maybe some lesser known brands who may not have had the distribution set up yet and so forth. So given the fact that COVID had a massive impact on the pub trade, the off trade has grown significantly.
The off trade has, because it's the only channel that's open for everything.
Yeah.
So I bought hair clippers. You wouldn't know it by my hair, by the way, or maybe that's why it's this way. I bought hair clippers. I bought, like a battery charger thing in Dunn stores, and but I also buy my groceries there. I buy whiskey there, So it is the only channel. It's really the only place, and there's obviously Tesco, Super Value, Most Great Centra, and all the other really great retailers that have. Without them, we would have been in very dire straits. From you think about them, they worked really hard. They've kept food on all our shelves. They've made like anything we want is available in these places. But then again, the on trade is shut with no clear pathway of it reopening. And the on trade is so important to our brands and to the whiskey industry in a wider point, because it is the channel where people get to sample our products, and then they might go buy a bottle for their home or whatever, but you're not going to spend £100 on a bottle if you've never tried it before. Now, with an exception of the Redbreast 10-year-old, and again, I saw Cormac saying that he wasn't disappointed by that. But I'm saying in the more traditional sense, people will trial it in the on-trade. They'll have a good experience about it. They'll deal with a bartender who's telling you that she had tried this whiskey and what do you think, and then she'll guide you through the next whiskey, and you get this experience that you don't get in these retailers, and also you get a selection that you're not able to get. And the competition or the other distilleries in Ireland are really, really important to Irish Distillers, because they mean that when a consumer comes into Irish whiskey, there's variety. It's an interesting category. There's loads going on, and then it means that more and more people come into Irish whiskey. We all win, and so I don't think that there's our brands are selling well, but they were selling very well prior to the lockdown. Yeah, and certainly the minute the pubs are reopen, it'll be a big job to try and make sure we get back in and support the on-trade in order for it to be there, so that we can continue to grow. Like, Irish whiskey was built in the last decade in the on-trade, and I've absolutely no problem with saying that. There are obviously independent off-trade places that I mentioned already that would also, you'd almost class them as being in the same sort of hands-on, unique experience when you go into them, as opposed to, no one comes near you in a multiple when you're purchasing a bottle of wine or whiskey. You're just browsing the shelves and you pick up a bottle, and it's very, lovely environment and all the rest. But the difference is you walk into one of these independent retailers, they'll engage with you, they'll help you through your purchase journey, and it's the same in a pub as well. So without the on-trade, it's so important to these brands. We're not going to be able to get brands to continue the momentum, get them off the ground. And you know what? It's much more crack in a pub than it is.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, look, I think the last time it was a Baker's Corner. We had the small Big Mac and I think it was a chicken curry. Yeah, that was a big feed.
We had a lot of food and a lovely drink as well. And basically,
I think it's the way around. We had a little bit of food and a lot of drink.
Yes, yeah. Well, we were drinking responsibly. I wouldn't like to paint
Of
the
course.
impression that the two of us were messing. But you know, you it's funny. It is. I just wanted to highlight that. We've been we've done okay, but we were doing very well prior to the lockdown, and this certainty. I think the work that was done by all of us in the industry, in the on-trade prior to the lockdown, was benefited anybody that it had a bottle of whiskey on the shelf. But there is you know, people are spending more in their baskets in supermarkets. They're trading up. That's what I'm noticing is people are, you know, they've no problem spending 65 quid in a bottle of Redbreast now. And it's not once for a treat. They're doing it on quite a regular basis now, because really there is no restaurants we can go to. There's no pubs we can go to. There's no cinemas. There's no, you know, it's really sad.
Disposable income, I suppose, on the one side has probably increased for those that, and I suppose we better remember really that there's an awful lot of people who have lost their jobs and who have no work at all, and you know, it's not all rosy for everybody, unfortunately. And you know, I'd be much happier to see everybody benefiting better out of that. But look, I mean, on the other side of things, Gerard, the long hours and the long commutes and the late nights that you would, and I've frequently been a passenger in your car on the way home after a tasting, probably been very poor conversation as I've been able to drink and you haven't. But, you know, those late nights, the long hours, the long commutes, they're at a halt, I suppose, which is one benefit maybe.
Yeah, I did 2 events in August, and they were the last bit of travel that I did. And even at that, they were socially distant, and you know, people wearing masks, and you know, well ventilated spaces and lower numbers. And I stayed in a hotel. You know, the event ended, went straight back to the hotel. You know, it was you know, there was no bar in the hotel. You know, it wasn't even comparable to the way it was pre this time last year. And that has been something that I used to spend a large amount of time traveling. But that travel time now has been filled by other work, you know. So it isn't like I gained something back. It actually meant that space then was filled by my employer, you know, looking at other areas of business where we could develop other solutions to support the on-trade in particular. Like as you said, the bar smarts that we offer to bartenders and publicans free of charge. Normally, I think it's about $80 for the course, and we offered it free of charge to anybody that wanted to sign up this time last year. You know, we're working on something else at the moment for April, and you know, again, it's about trying to help those people, like, in some way, to give them some sort of upskilling. My big fear is post this is that we'll lose a lot of the passionate people about Irish whiskey that will go and work for I don't know, an insurance company or something, you know, and they won't want to. It'd be really, really sad and difficult.
Yeah, it'll be a pity. I mean, passion won't put food on the table, unfortunately, but so I can understand that. But look, I mean, I don't know how many tastings I've been and how many times I've heard you speak, but I think this was with the Aviators Society outside Jameson in Bow Street. That was a great night, and that was a walking tour of Dublin. So one of the things that you're incredibly strong at, Gerard, is you're obviously very passionate about the brand, but your encyclopedic knowledge of the history of the area, and this isn't history that you know, you're going to look up and read in a book. This is history from you talking to somebody's grandson that was, you know, involved in Bow Street or something like that. There's so many of those stories that are just, well, they're touching, I suppose, and they're real. Which is just, and here you are standing outside the still there. Yeah, I definitely think that's the Aviator Society. Although you speak at all of them. Billy gave me this photo. This was
oh my God, that's in Centre George Pompidou, I think. I'm pretty
Well,
sure
yes,
that is in Paris.
yes, a very flattering. Yeah, well,
That
a
was
lovely
that was like
whiskey.
1 o'clock in the morning.
Well, for 1 o'clock in the morning, you're doing very well. I don't know. Are you holding him up or is he holding you up?
I've no idea where we got
Hmm?
those top cider because we weren't wearing them when we went to the gig. So yeah.
And I think this was the Kilkenny Guild where you launched the Method and Madness series, and obviously that's it's a particular brand I'm really fond of as well. That and the Green Spot and the Spot range, but that was a fantastic. And what do
That
you
was
get out?
brilliant.
What do you get most out of giving these talks, Ger? Because you speak so passionately and so knowledgeably about this stuff, and I know people come out afterwards really fulfilled and excited about the brands that you talk about.
What I
What does
get
it mean
most
to
out of it
you? Yeah,
is, yeah, the number one thing is that excitement that you get from people are starting them on their whiskey journey. That particular event, the way it was marketed, the brand, it attracted an audience that was mainly female, and
yeah,
it was a younger audience than we're used to at our, say, normal events we go to, like old farts like you and me. They
like
were
all is in our 30s. Yeah,
Yeah, there
I
were
know what
people.
you're saying.
Yes, well, the people at that event were, again,
Younger.
younger, in their 30s. They were mainly female, about 2/3 female, and it's because of the brand. And I always am really cognizant that it is actually the brands that people, are really, that really drive people's intrigue and passion. And
Yeah,
Method of Madness is one of those brands that really intrigues people. It allows us to show people the experimentation and the vibrant kind of artistic side to the people in Middleton Distillery. Also, the bottle looks great, the branding is great, the name is kind of intriguing, and the drinks were great too. And we had ran the night. It was almost like a perfume launch, if you want to call it that, but it was
yeah,
really interesting.
yeah,
And we had we had a lovely set, dressed and everything, and it went really well. And that night in particular was a lot different than the other. Oh, thanks a million, Mihal. That's so nice of you to say. Appreciate that. And then we had all of, we basically approached this differently than we would have done, say, in traditional Kilkenny Whiskey Guild tasting, like we would have done with the micro distillery expose across the way.
yeah,
At the back of the wine centre, we did we had Gerard Buckley there and Dave McCabe, and it was more focused on kind of the distilling side of things, whereas the Method of Madness one we did in the theatre there at Langton's was
yeah,
more kind of like we treated it like an event as opposed to a whiskey tasting, and I think that's why
yeah,
it attracted a different audience. And it is about showing people that whiskey is not just like, I like drinking it this way out of a glass, and I like drinking it neat like that, but other people like drinking it in a cocktail, people like drinking it as a highball, and that's what we featured on the night. We had a highball, we had a cocktail, we had a neat serve, and it meant that people could experience all the different kind of whiskey drinks. And with Method of Madness, you can really do anything you want with the whiskey because there's no kind of rules around it. There's no tradition because it's quite a new brand, and the micro distillery itself is just a fantastic place to visit as well if you're ever in Middleton.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I've been there, and that's been a fantastic experience. And it serves not only as a great experimentation, but I'm sure it's a fantastic facility for the new trainees that are coming in, the new graduates, to start them up in that.
Yeah, and it is it comes to mind actually Deirdre O'Carroll, who has just been appointed blender. Deirdre would have come in about 8 years ago. She did I think it was food science in UCC, and she then went on and, as part of her training, did the diploma in the GCD, as we call it, the General Certificate in Brewing and Distilling Cereals. And basically she joined as an engineer. I think it was the first year of it. she's very young, but it was back in 2012. So she is just been appointed blender, but she would have worked as would have Karen Cotter, as would have our other Henry Donnelly, all would have worked in the micro distillery at various points in time. Now they're working in different areas now, but they would have come in as these Jemison engineering graduates, and basically, she's just recently been appointed, but the micro distillery again is a place where they would have learned about the program. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a set of stills. There's a gin still. There's 3 pot stills in there, and basically all of the distilling is hands-on. There's no computers to help you. Everything is by using logbooks, just basically trying to assess through your nose where you make the cuts. There's no technology really to help you to execute a distillation.
And the fundamentals, then, I suppose, the hands-on fundamentals.
Hands-on way under the supervision of the head distiller. So Kevin O'Gorman or his predecessor Brian Nation, and they're so that is it. It's in a space where they're actually, the impact that they have, even slightly, is really there. They can have an impact on the final spirit in the main with those big pot stills in the garden still have it is paints that are going on that are so important that there is no opening for experimentation that there is in the micro distillery, which is I believe or is the 5th largest distillery in Ireland. So
it just puts it into scale. I'm just pouring myself actually a Blue Spot, another release that came out relatively recently, and that's well, maybe you can tell us a little bit about it from your side. But
okay,
this
so
is my one here, mini bottle.
I have a mini bottle as well. Blue Spot is a 7-year-old whiskey, so you see it on the label there, a 7, but it's 7 to 20 years old. So like all of the Spot range, it has a medium style of pot still in the family. That would have been similar to the Bow Street style that was distilled in Bow Street. And this is because Mitchell's, who are still in business today, 7th generation, Robert Mitchell, and his father, 6th generation, Johnny or Jonathan Mitchell, and a really wonderful family involved in the wine and spirits business for 7 generations. And they imported sherries and cognacs and all this sort of stuff within Johnny's lifetime. And they would have filled those barrels in their, they would have emptied those sherry, cognac, wine barrels, all the rest, in their own cellars on Fitzwilliam Lane. I think you went there with
the basement underneath,
with the launch of Red Spot.
Yes.
So they were the original sellers of Mitchell's, and they would have produced a whiskey called Mitchell's and Son Old Pat's Whiskey Liqueur. Rolls off the tongue.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely, but they would have coloured the barrels in the cellars with a spot to indicate what age the whiskey was going to be. So they would have put a green spot on something that was going to be a 10-year-old whiskey, yellow spot on a 12-year-old whiskey, 15-year-old would have been a red spot, and a blue spot on a 7-year-old whiskey. And basically, the reason they did this is because the guys working there at the turn of the 20th century, a lot of them didn't have great literacy. And also because the cellars are subterraneous, you would have got a lot of dust and detritus, there would have been busy carriage houses. It would have meant, if you're written something on the barrel, it would have been hard to read. The color coding is a lot more simpler way of doing that. But then the barrels were shipped off to, say, a pub, let's say O'Donoghue's on Merrion Row around the corner from there. Whether they did or did buy it, I don't know. But basically, they would have mounted the barrel of whiskey on the back bar, and the whiskey would have been dispensed from the barrel. The barrel would have had Mitchell's and Son and Old Pat's Whiskey Liqueur, and then you would have seen a spot of paint, and then basically publicans, I suppose people over the bar would go, give me the green spotted whiskey, or give me the red spotted whiskey, or the blue spotted whiskey, and then eventually they started writing in orders to Mitchell's asking for this particular whiskey, and they realized that was a better brand name, so they started. They have a range. I think Robert showed me a price list from the early 1920s, the Grand War of Independence time, with the various spots in the catalogue. So but this blue spot hasn't appeared since.
No, I have not seen. I mean, I've seen a yellow, a green, and a red spot, old bottlings, but I've never seen a blue bottling. If anybody has a photograph of an old blue spot, or they'd like to share with us, that would be fantastic. But I think they're, I certainly have been looking for a long time and haven't come across it. But
so basically it's cask strength. The recommended retail in Ireland was €80. It's available in the US, in the UK, Northern Ireland, obviously. Global travel retail, which is shut. Well, it's open, but we're not allowed to go to it.
Yes.
So you could be lucky in going through an airport and see it on the shelf, but it's sold out in Ireland before Christmas.
So it's a limited batch run every year, is it?
Yeah, and simply because the Madeira component, is about 16 to 20 years of age, so we don't have a whole lot of it maturing.
Yeah. So this composition, is this a mod pot, or?
Yeah, all of the spot range, both the wine geese like the Chateau Levo Barton and the Chateau Montelena, green spot, yellow spot, red spot, blue spot, are all this Middleton mod pot style, the MMP style. And the reason for that is the Bow Street style. That was when they built Middleton. They wanted to again create different styles that were reflective of the founding distilleries. And you think about it, that Mitchell sourced all their new make spirit from Bow Street Distillery, as Gilbey's did as well. So that's why both of those whiskies contain that style of spirit in it. But it's all of the range have both bourbon and sherry. So green spot is about, I think maybe 10% sherry, 90% bourbon. But then you're getting into yellow spot, also has the inclusion of Malaga casks. Then you have red spot, also has the inclusion of Sicilian Marsala wine casks. And then you have, in the case of blue spot, Madeira wine casks from Enrique and Enrique, who make a Madeira wine in the island of Madeira, which is part of Portugal. It's part of the Portuguese state, and basically would have been, well, it was definitely Churchill's favorite holiday spot. And also, they have a long connection with England because, well, they were allies, I suppose, in the First World War, but also secondly, it's because all of their products like port, Madeira wine, the British Empire would have been their main market for these products. So you find a lot of connections there. But in our case, in Ireland, it would have been Mitchell's importing them directly from Madeira there. But it would have been Brendan Monks would have built up the relationships down here. Then
even back then, he would have built up relationships with the Madeira, Marsala, Malaga casks.
Yeah. And then young Billy Lighton would have travelled with him with endless lunches and dinners.
The suffering, yeah.
For him. And, and Dave McCabe now has been dragged around to all of these terrible places.
He probably had to bring Gerard Buckley as well, did they?
They brought Gerard Buckley with them as well. I don't know. I just feel I'm worried for all of them. I hope they're all right after all this. And I have.
There's a question in here from Fionn. Hi, Fionn. Good evening. Is the Madeira component purely from the older age stock in it?
Older age stock, as in, these are barrels that would have been sourced as part of that wort management program in Porto, and then they're shipped to Madeira and seasoned in Madeira. And then the older component of the whiskey is Madeira wine seasoned barrels. So the pot still that's in these is in around the 16-year-old mark. It is
right.
So it is that's what's basically holding us back from having a
bigger release.
A bigger release of it. But the barrels themselves, they're Portuguese oak that are the cooperage is in Porto, and then they're shipped over to Madeira, which is about 1,000 kilometers out in sea, and then they're seasoned in Enrique with the Madeira wine for 2 to 3 years, and then they are shipped to Ireland empty, obviously. Yeah. So that's how we get them from. So I think that's what he's asking.
Yeah, another very unfair question here. Probably, what's your favorite of the spot range? Please don't tell me they're all your babies, because you're not like.
Green Spot was the one that I used to really love all the time. But I mean, I think I'm drinking more of the. I love the Shadow Montelena. I love it. I think it's a really interesting whiskey. But I find that the Blue Spot is great for maybe a glass, and it's really quite a bit of muscle, and so I think I'll settle on the Shadow Montelena, the Shadow Leopold Burton, actually, is what I'll settle on. It's that kind of summer fruit crush, you get this kind of strawberries and, fruit crush type note from it, which is really, in the summertime, it's a lovely whiskey in the summer.
Yeah, but I mean, this Blue Spot is a belter as well. It's so full, it's so rich, it's creamy, it's peppery. But it's not so much summer fruit as maybe pale fruits,
like orchard, green apple, that sort of thing. Yeah, and then Yellow Spot is a creme brulee. It just really reminds me that when they burn the caramel on panna catalana or creme brulee, it has that type of note to it. It really smells like a dessert. I think it's the Malaga wine casks really giving that influence. So. It is amazing by the introduction of a fortified wine cask of some shape or form, how it transforms the whiskey. But fortified wine or wine is all across the range. So you have, as I said, the sherry wine influence, which is obviously a fortified wine, but you have Madeira, Marsala, Malaga, and that's so each one. Yeah.
Are the spot range starting to get the international recognition that they deserve?
Yeah, they are. Really strong growth in markets like Canada, the United States, obviously. So really, really good growth in those markets. But also everything is growing in Ireland. Every single one of the whiskies that we produce is growing in Ireland, because there's more and more people coming into Irish whiskey, which is great.
So what are the emerging markets that you see? Obviously the States and Canada are big, and for the rest of the world, where do you see the growth coming from?
I think certainly Russia is a really potential market, just its size. I think we have an advantage just, historically, because of who we are, and our nearest neighbors might have more challenges in the Russian market than ourselves. I think Poland, South Africa has always been a great market. Sub-Saharan Africa, places like Mozambique, Nigeria.
They seem to be growing, Even really Eastern Africa, I saw figures there growing hugely.
Kenya has been good as well, but countries like Nigeria are enormous, and populations that are all between 20, the majority of the population kind of under 30. Unfortunately, like South America have their own spirits, but I think there could be absolutely potential there.
I'm hearing from Argentina. I mean, I think Juan, I don't know if he's he usually is from Argentina, is really Irish whiskey is really starting to become great. I think they're the largest or fourth largest Irish community abroad outside of Ireland, so huge growth happening there. And of course, I suppose Asia as well is where there's another market, isn't there?
Yeah, I think Asia is a fantastic market and opportunity, but I think it almost scares me in some ways because of how big it is. Can you imagine, if it took off in China, it would just be, I think the market is just, it's enormous, it's so vast. It's hard to get your head around how
No,
many
but there are,
people,
I mean, there have been efforts in Middleton Distillery to increase production capacity, and there are future plans, I assume, to grow that capacity. When do we expect to see that really come through?
Well, the capacity, I suppose the company have made huge investments in Irish Distillers. Even when we were looking at the last recession we talked about there, they continued to produce at a normal level. So that meant is that today we have stock to supply all of that demand. And if that decision had been made, if we had done the opposite and said, "Oh, we better slow things down," and then again they built, the Garden Still House, which was completed in 2016 with the introduction of the other 3 pot stills in the back. And we are seeing the fruits of that now, like with the amount of barrels that are being laid down. As I said, over 1.8 million barrels are now under Kevin O'Gorman's stewardship then in Middleton, and then people like Finbar and Anna also working with him, and Gerard Buckley and his team making sure that they're always in good nick. I mean, it's the fruits of that are happening now, but then you have people like Billy Lighton who are responsible for forecasting what the future is going to be like, and Billy's looking at 20, 30, 40 years out, but there is no doubt, I think, particularly in the last 3 years, it really has accelerated that growth, and that's something that I think there are emerging markets. You've always got to be looking for new markets to spread your risk over.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about it in terms of world's market share that Irish whiskey have, it's probably around the 5 to the highest number I've heard is 8%, but somewhere around there. There's still huge capacity and huge potential to grow that market. So capacity is an issue at the moment, and I imagine planning is going in place for growing. But if you look at what's out there at the moment, and you look at the competitors or your fellow peers in terms of Irish whiskey, what are you seeing as the emerging trends out there?
Premiumization. So that's people basically trading up to just more rarer whiskies, or whiskies that are older, that
more
are
complex.
More complex. So more sophisticated consumers, more premiumization. I think that really is both on and off trade, and
is that driven by the consumer, Ger? The consumer being more, or
consumer is, as I keep on saying, a consumer is there's no more person discerning than the consumer of whiskey, and they're drinking less, so they're consuming less alcohol, but they're actually drinking better. So this is the trend globally, and in Ireland as well. It's not just, and the market is becoming more global. So look, it's led by Redbreast at the moment. The Spot range and Middleton are having phenomenal growth as well, but from smaller bases. But the category is led by that. But the job is for the Irish whiskey companies, not just Irish Distillers, for all of us to create a premium whiskey market, particularly in the United States. Because I look at our Scottish cousins across the river, across the sea, and their biggest market by volume is France. Now we'll exclude the stuff, their wholesale supply into India, but their biggest volume supply is into France, but it's not by value. America by value. And if you go into a liquor store in Texas or New York, I mean, the selection of Irish whiskies is much better than it was 10 years ago, but it's still not anything to what we have in Ireland, or compared to the Scots in the market. So everybody's working hard, to try and grow, to try and create the premium category, a premium category in the United States, and that would be great, because in America you have your blended Scotch whiskey, which is perfectly great. But then they also have premium blends,
Yes.
and they also have malt whiskies, and there's clear distinctions in the American consumer's mind. And I would argue that there is potential to create a category where there is an Irish version of that, and they just don't know about it yet. And those that do know about it, they're really in on it, and they love it, and
That's
really
like the Redbreast, for those in the know, kind of tag that was associated with the Redbreast. It was kind of an under the covers, below the radar brand that only the discerning drinker would really know about. And look how well it's doing now. But
it's like I'll let you into my pass it on to the next guy, and I'll let you into know about this great whiskey, and I'm letting you know because I really value you as a friend. But it is, and that's how it's grown in Canada because of the restrictions on both distribution and also advertising. Being down to that very thing. Them, local neighborhood whiskey clubs, talking, doing these tastings, and going, "Wow, look at this! This is amazing!" And get more information on it from our colleagues in Corby or whatever it was. But in the US, it's different. You have a different, more open market, and it's just about trying to create that excitement and engagement with consumers. And the Irish Whiskey Association do great work, and I suppose making sure that we didn't suffer from the trade, the trade dispute that was engaged with.
In fairness, and to give credit where credit's due, that was a great piece of work in terms of not getting those restrictions.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and you think about that could have been detrimental to our industry and to employment here. So that's just something in the short term. But again, I think the responsibility is on to Irish Distillers, to all the other companies that are distributing in America, that we try and create a premium category. So we create products, we create products that appeal to consumers in America. So that's where I think the potential is. So premiumization, hopefully that's my buzzword for the night, and that's how we've done it in Ireland. So we've got people. You have to educate bartenders on why should someone pay, €7. Why should you drink? Go from, say Redbreast 12-year-old to Redbreast 15 or Redbreast 21. Like, what's the difference? I know there's different ages, but like, why? Why is there a difference there? So you have to educate people on. Well, actually, it's because it's older, it's more expensive to make. There's a type of spirit in here is more expensive to make. Give them all the little tips, the couple of seconds they have to talk to the guy across the bar and explain to them.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed about you, Jerry, I mean, with all the growth that's happening and all the new distilleries that are emerging, and it's fantastic to see the diversity and the number of new distilleries, you've always been very complimentary and always very positive about the new entrance into the market and what it's doing for Irish whiskey. Although, commercially, competitors.
A lot of my ex-colleagues or a lot of my friends work for them. So that's one reason. Also, I like their products. I think it's great to have Dingles, to have, Bushmills producing the Causeway series. The stuff that Tullamore are doing as well. People like Kevin Piggott or John Quinn in Tullamore, or Colin Megan in Bushmills, or Seamus Lowry. You think of just the late Mary in Dingle and stuff like that. The really great people that just are and it's not twee to say they are really good friends. Like, we're all competitors, absolutely competing.
But that's a camaraderie, isn't there? I mean, I think it would be fair to say that between a lot of the brand ambassadors actually work together to get into new markets abroad. So there is a camaraderie in the industry that you don't see in other markets.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was in, I think I was talking to a gentleman, an older brand ambassador, if you want to call him that. And I'm not going to say his name. It's not fair to say this, but he said when he was going into a bar anywhere in the world, and if he, particularly in America, if he didn't see Jameson on the back bar, he said he would kind of be fearful that it was worth its while going in there, because it has opened the door for two people for Irish whiskey. But again, it's about it is it's what's driven the growth of Irish whiskey over the last couple of decades, and I'm unapologetic about that. But as I said, competition is really important, or variety is really important. We have to have a vibrant industry in order for it to continue to grow, for our for us to compete with Taiwanese whiskey, Japanese whiskey, with Scottish whiskey, with American whiskey. So we
absolutely
have a vibrant industry, and also we need more places to hold the Irish Whiskey Awards. So that's the other thing.
Yeah, well, that's true.
So, I mean, it was brilliant to go to Dingle. I was really looking forward to going to Periscourt, because we both
that was such a shame. Yeah,
we live so close to Periscourt Distillery, and even at Christmas time, I was down there visiting Santa or something, and I remember sitting outside the distillery watching them, filling a tractor with the draft left over from their fermentation. And there's loads of great distilleries out there.
You know what happens as well when the distillery's closer to you, you're the last one leaving it. That's the problem.
Yeah, but they've promised to hold it next year. So
that's great. That's great.
I'll do that, and I look forward to that. But basically, what I'm getting at is, there are some brilliant, there's brilliant people out there. There's great distilleries, and I'm not going to call out everyone, and we're not all friends and buddies and all that sort of crack. But in the background, there is the industry is really quite. People do try to help each other out on a production. From a production point of view, there is a buddy system that the Irish Whiskey Association have with small distilleries and larger distilleries. There is also then what I would call formal arrangements as well, where people will ex-colleagues pick up the phone to other ex-colleagues and say, here, where did you get that packaging from? You wouldn't find out from us, sir. Where did you get that label from? Where did you get that bottle from? You know what, we're working on this project. We don't know what to do about this wine finishing. Could you tell us how you did it? And then maybe we might be able to. So there is a lot of sharing of information there. It isn't all about, but obviously at the end of the day, we're trying to sell whiskey. We all have stock that we've made, and we need to move it on. But there is I think quite a healthy approach to the business, not like there was when I worked in telecoms anyway, where everyone was trying to cut each other's throat.
Well, speaking about sharing, obviously, and I know nobody is listening from Irish Distillers. You're going to give us the list of new releases that we're expecting from Irish Distillers over the next year. Is there anything you can talk about?
I'm going to put myself on mute, and I'll tell you now.
Fantastic.
And I'll take myself off mute again there. So you got that, did you? Anyone that lip read got that, so that's no problem. There are new releases coming quite soon. Around World Whiskey Day, there may be something coming along, possibly. So www.redbreastwhiskey.com/birdhouse. It's always good to keep an eye out. On that website. There is 2 more releases after that that are coming in late autumn as well.
Under which umbrella?
God, I can't recall. I can't. So there are. So there is. That's the great thing. There's a lot of innovation in the pipeline that is coming out. It's very exciting, and from all different families as well.
Well, we didn't. Yeah, that's an interesting point. We didn't actually talk about the Dargailloch range at all, and it must be coming up time for a release from that, I'd imagine.
I would imagine it'll be before Christmas, but I don't think it's going to be in the next couple of months. I don't think so. There is, obviously there's a Dargailloch. There's more than likely going to be. There definitely is going to be a dream cask, I would hope, around World Whiskey Day. Then there's whiskies from other families. There'll be another batch of Blue Spot in in around before Christmas. I don't know when. So there is stuff coming along all the time, and obviously the new vintage of Middleton Very Rare won't be now till next year. Normally it will come in October, but there will be another equal amount of the same batch that we produce coming at the end of autumn as well. And so there's other whiskies in there that I really cannot talk about, but it's exciting, and they're coming from brands that you love and know, and I think you'd be really interested in them. And I'm sure on Whiskey Magazine will certainly be the place to go to look for those.
Well, obviously, you've just announced the next release of the Dream Cask, which will be happening, everybody, on.
I just said that I think more than likely, probably, absolutely, maybe. And Billy Lighton and Dave McCabe and now Deirdre will be obviously involved in that, but it's well on the road to do it. So that's it. And then will we see a John's Lane cask strength in 2021? Dave O'Connell, who is Mr. Powers Whiskey, if there was a non-employed Powers brand ambassador, it would be Dave O'Connell. And certainly, is there, to my knowledge, Dave, there is no plans to release this as a cask strength whiskey, and that would be an honest answer anyway that I can see in the next till next Christmas time. Anyway, it's not in the plans for.
But it should be a Method in Madness and a Dream Cask and a Dargaelic this year, and then a Redbreast Dream Cask. So that's enough to keep us going for the moment. And I'm going to ask you a question that you're going to probably hate me for it, but of the brands that you have underneath you, what's your favorite, and which one do you see as being the one to watch out for in terms of something really different coming out?
Well, Method of Madness is always, they always are looking at new and interesting whiskies within that range, because that's what the range it is, experimental, but there are definitely exciting things to come, from all of the brands, really. So that I'd be delighted to tell you, but I'm not able to at the moment. But there are definitely some very exciting and interesting releases coming from basically the whole families of whiskies.
The whole portfolio. Yeah. I mean, you must have one of the, I would say, the most enviable role out there, getting to work with so many different whiskeys, get to meet so many different people, getting the experts. Obviously, international travel and local travel is out of the question at the moment. What are you most looking forward to out of lockdown?
Literally meeting up with everybody, that we would normally meet up with, traveling the length and breadth of the country in a pub, and whether it's Dick Max and Dingle or Baker's Corner or Finnegan's Rental Lounge or the Palace Bar, the Temple Bar, or all of those amazing pubs. I'm sorry if I left anyone out, but just going down to Cork, visiting pubs in Cork, going to Galway, going to Limerick. I really do. That's the thing I miss the most. Absolutely.
Because I know, like, if anybody's, and a lot of people have heard you speak, and I have to say, you just keep on, and I'm not to. Obviously, you're a good friend, but the level of knowledge that you possess and that you share just keeps on increasing ridiculously. And I guess maybe that's partly because the portfolio is growing as well, but also, the composition and the history and the everyday stories that you give. There's no other ambassador that has that level of storytelling and knowledge that you have. And it's such a credit to IDLs, and I hope they really appreciate you, and such a credit to the Irish whiskey landscape as a whole, because you've inspired a lot of people. You've certainly inspired myself a lot and encouraged so much, and I've never come across anybody to have an inkling of a bad word about you. I mean, where do you see yourself in 10 years' time in terms of doing what you're doing? Will you still have the energy, the appetite and passion to be doing the role you're doing, or would you like to move some other direction?
Well, I've certainly, I would like very much to still be involved in some shape or form representing the brands, but the reality is because Irish whiskey, and particularly the brands that I represent, are growing at such a rate, it is becoming less physically possible to be everywhere, be omnipresent, and that is exhausting because, as I said, you're going from, when I started the role 4 times a year doing something, and now you're doing it 4 times a week. It is tiring. Like everything from your voice, your physically, your diet is, you have to watch your diet. You have to watch how much you imbibe as well. That's important.
Absolutely.
Tastings that I'll drink very, very little, the absolute minimal when doing a tasting many times, because I just want to I have something on the next day or whatever it is. But it is, I get great joy from it, I really do. So where I see myself is I'd like to still be involved, but certainly I've built a team now where I have 5 people working with me in the team. And that is, originally I had 1 2 years ago, and then I had 2, and then 3 more joined the team after Christmas last year, and just as we were getting going, COVID came along. So I
know you get as much enjoyment out of sharing your knowledge and managing the team as you do being out there as well. But does a brand ambassador reach a certain point also age-wise where it just becomes more difficult to do?
Yeah, I think the challenge is that my role isn't really a traditional brand ambassador. So although I've always done some sort of promotion or education around around the products, I have done other roles as well. So when I started off, when I took over from Seamus Lowry, 10% of my time was meant to be dedicated to the whiskey ambassador role, and within 12 months it had become 80%, and then eventually after 2 or 3 years, all the commercial customers I was looking after were moved on to other people in the team. And although I sit under the sales function, and my role is around brand engagement, creating experiences, brand education, training, drink development, new product development. I'm part of helping with all of those things. I'm not fully the be all and end all of them, but it is the role that we've got is you're adding value to the proposition for the whiskies and for my employer. So when we're dealing with someone commercially, they wheel us out like, I don't know, the Von Trapp family, as if
I mean, it's part of the business that perhaps the consumer doesn't see. Obviously, the consumer sees you at tastings, but the behind the scenes work that you do in terms of training other staff, meeting with sales team, meeting with distributors, meeting with bars, developing new tastings, developing new cocktails. I know you've been involved in as well, and product development as well. All that is behind the scenes work that people don't see. And I know you're incredibly busy, and it's. But I know you love it too. I know you love it.
No, listen.
I know you.
How? Let's go back to my first real job on the road was I worked part-time in Dunnes Stores, but when I left and I worked in Fitzpatrick's Hotel worked there for 2 years, kind of quasi hotel management, but it was more just doing every job that was given to you. And I did a job, my first job, basically selling plastic forks, plastic bottles, refuse sacks into restaurants, pubs, supermarkets. And when I think about it now, what I do now, I get up in the morning. I love basically 90% of the job. I love the other 10% is like everyone. You have little frustrations and in work and it pressures and all the rest. But I really do realize how lucky I am, and I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you. You can probably see it when I'm doing the job. It is just so rewarding. You get to meet so many people. You get to. I think what interests me about whiskey is just all the stories, the people. Like, you know, me being on first name terms of people that I would have, I idealized. You know, the likes of Dave Broom, who I think is just amazing whiskey writer, and you know, he'd know my name. You know, that sort of way. He'll be like, "Wow, you know," you know,
no, can I mention
Richard Harrison from the Dalmore, you know, effing and blinding at me, you know, having the crack, and you know, you think this is amazing because these are all people that are legends in the whiskey industry, and then of course Billy Lighton, Kevin O'Gorman, Brian Nation, you know, Barry Crockett, Carol Quinn. You know, Carol Quinn's just an amazing woman, and you also then have the other people that you wouldn't, you know, Conor McQuaid, the CEO, Brendan Buckley, who's the head of innovation, who really is totally an unsung hero about the innovations that are created. And they're just the internal people. And then there's all the other people that you meet, the people like Alex Chasko and Teeling, or, you know, you meet the guys in Dingle, you know, Oliver Hughes, who I, you know, would have met, who was ahead of his time, a legend. You know, just trying to think of people. I don't know about you if I wasn't in the whiskey business. No.
Well, I'm sure I bumped into you in the local news agents, and you know, told you to get out of my way or something. But I mean, the friendships that occur because of whiskey are phenomenal, and you know. But I think you know, it's nice having friends, and it's another thing being so highly respected and admired. And you are, Ger. I mean, you really are highly respected and admired. And I wanted to finish on a nice note in terms of have you any nice St. Patrick's Day toasts for us to wrap up the evening on? Because I know Ashley, your good wife, is incredibly understanding and patient, and like to leave you a couple of hours for Paddy's Day yourselves. But yeah, just to wrap up the evening and finish off my sentence.
I'll try and butcher one that Gerard Buckley taught me, which is may the roof above us never fall in. May the friends below it never fall out. Sláinte.
Sláinte. Sure. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you more than just passing by at a distance, and I might even give you a hug. You know? But look,
we'll see. We'll
wait for that. But look, thank you for giving up your St. Patrick's Day evening. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And like I said, thank you so much for joining. Look, everybody that was on the show, thank you very much for joining. I hope you enjoyed and picked up some interesting facts there, and the passion that Ger has for this business and what he's brought to it. And we hope you enjoy the rest of St. Patrick's Day and have a fantastic rest of the week. And next year, we're really going to celebrate this in style and get out there and enjoy it. So please, God, we all stay safe. Thank you so much, everybody. Ger, as always, a pleasure. I'm sure I'll speak to you very soon. And thank you very much. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I mean, really a fantastic ambassador for Irish whiskey, as I said. Irish Distillers, lucky to have him. I am sure he's very much appreciated there. And thank you for joining us. Look, we hope you had a fantastic St. Patrick's Day. I know for some people it's still early days, but do sit down, enjoy some great Irish whiskey, and more importantly, some great company with friends and loved ones that and still be safe. So thank you very much. Happy St. Patrick's Day, and we'll speak to you next week. Thank you very much.